Hello. As a part of our early discussions about the psychology of religion, I'd like to talk with you today about how psychology and religion are different. This will be a brief discussion hitting on the main points that help us to look at the differences between psychology and religion, and also how these two fields can be complementary of each other. So let's start with psychology. What does psychology attempt to help us with in general? The psychology attempts to help people gain control over what they have not controlled. And when we think about different psychological theoretical orientations, it can help us to appreciate this element of control that we see in psychological theories and research. Let's take the psychodynamic approach of Freud first. As you know, Freud believed that we have an unconscious mind and that things that go on in our unconscious mind affect our thoughts, feelings, and behavior. So if someone is experiencing psychological problems and they receive help from a psychodynamic perspective, then the therapist is most likely going to try to help make their unconscious conscious so that the person will be able to gain better control over some aspects of their thoughts, feelings, and behavior. If we wanted to think about it from a learning perspective, say classical conditioning or operant conditioning, as you know, it's all about how what occurs in the environment affects or controls our behavior, say through rewards and punishments in the case of operant conditioning. So in order to change behavior, we need to change rewards and punishments. It's all about control in that way. And then finally, we might think about the cognitive perspective. As you know, the cognitive perspective in psychology is interested in looking at how we think about things and how our thoughts affect our feelings and our behavior. Using another clinical example, if someone were depressed and they were seeing a therapist who approached their work from a cognitive perspective, they might try to help that person gain a better understanding of their thinking so they can make their thinking more realistic and in turn hopefully help them to improve their depression and begin to feel better. We could come up with other examples, but these three different psychological perspectives are sufficient to help us appreciate how much of psychology revolves around the issue of control. And how do we gain understanding in the field of psychology? It's through research. Psychologists ask questions, and they try to answer those questions through various kinds of research. So for psychology, the focus is on control and on research as a way of gaining understanding. Religion looks at human nature from a really different perspective. Religion helps us to appreciate what we cannot control. The essence of religion is to have a willingness to surrender. The famous psychologist William James, in his book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, put it this way. He said, there is a state of mind known to religious men, but to no others, in which the will to assert ourselves and hold our own has been displaced by a willingness to close our mouths and be as nothing in the floods and waterspouts of God. William James believed that this willingness to surrender is the essence of religion. And you'll find this quote in Harden's book on page 8. Have you ever been in a place in your life where your best efforts at control were not working very well for you? In fact, you may have gotten yourself into a place where you were engaging in a lot of self-defeating behavior and causing problems for yourself and for people that you cared about. In other words, control wasn't working. You might have been continuing to do the same self-defeating things over and over again. So perhaps seeking therapy and being able to gain insight into why you're doing those things could help you to gain better control over them. That would be approaching it more from the psychological perspective. But to approach that kind of manageability in a person's life from a religious perspective, we would say we need to involve surrender, where we admit we can't do it on our own, and we need God's help to get to a better place. So what we're suggesting is that the essence of religion, when we look at a comparison between religion and psychology, is surrender. And the paradox of surrender is that by giving up control, it can actually help us eventually to gain a greater mastery of living down the road. So for religion, at the heart of it lies an appreciation for the limits of human agency and this willingness to surrender. We will be exploring this notion about surrender some more later on. So while psychology and religion are both concerned with the problems of personal control, their assessment of the problem and their solutions are quite different, as we can see. The psychological world helps people extend their personal control, gaining understanding through research, while the religious world helps people face their personal limitations and go beyond themselves for solutions. And in the religious world, we gain understanding through revelation. Well, how does that work, revelation? We gain understanding through activities like prayer, meditation, reading the Bible and other sacred literature, religious rituals, communal worship, embracing religious traditions, religious reason, art, intimate human relationships, social compassion, and other means that enable us to gain a better understanding of God's working in our lives, to gain a better understanding of the sacred. And the psychology of religion helps to bridge a deep psychological tradition of helping people to take control of what they can in times of stress, with a religious tradition of helping people accept their limitations and look beyond themselves for assistance in troubling times, as Pargaman explains in his book. So this talk about the difference between psychology and religion reminds me of the Serenity Prayer attributed to Reinhold Niebuhr. You may be familiar with the Serenity Prayer already, but I wanted to share it with you in closing this discussion. This is a prayer that I use in my life often, and I would encourage you to consider how it might be useful to you as well. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.